Hurricane. The town of Milton, once a peaceful and thriving community, has been utterly devastated by a Category 5 hurricane. The destruction left in the wake of this natural disaster is almost incomprehensible. What was once a bustling town is now a ghostly wasteland, marred by debris, collapsed buildings, and a deep sense of loss. The people of Milton have been left shattered, both emotionally and physically, as they try to pick up the pieces of a life that will never be the same. 1. Infrastructure destruction. The hurricane unleashed winds over 150 miles per hour, tearing apart homes, businesses, and critical infrastructure. Buildings that had stood for decades were reduced to rubble. Schools, hospitals, and government offices, pillars of the community, were either severely damaged or completely flattened. Roads have been washed away by flooding, leaving entire neighborhoods isolated and inaccessible. Bridges, once vital for transportation, lie in ruins, cutting off key supply routes and delaying recovery efforts. Electricity has been out for weeks, and there's no clear timeline for when it will be restored. Power lines are tangled like webs, while transformers lay burnt and exploded. Milton's water supply has been contaminated, leaving residents without safe drinking water. The sewer systems have overflowed, mixing with floodwaters and spreading disease. Communication lines are down and cell towers destroyed, making it impossible for residents to contact loved ones or seek help. 2. Economic fallout. Milton's economy was largely dependent on small businesses and local industries, most of which have been obliterated. Shops and restaurants, the heart of the community's commercial activity, have been washed away or remain buried under debris. Factories and warehouses have been torn apart, with heavy machinery thrown about like toys by the relentless winds. Jobs have vanished overnight. Thousands of people are now unemployed, with little hope of rebuilding in the near future. Insurance claims are being denied or delayed, leaving business owners and residents in financial ruin. The town's tourism industry, a once burgeoning sector that attracted visitors to its historical sites and natural beauty, has collapsed. There's little chance Milton will recover economically for decades to come. 3. Environmental catastrophe. The environmental toll is equally severe. The hurricane has decimated local wildlife habitats, uprooted trees, and polluted the land. Rivers have overflowed, causing massive floods that have swept away entire communities. Toxic chemicals from factories have spilled into the water, creating a hazardous environment for both humans and animals. The beaches and natural parks that once attracted visitors have been swallowed by the sea, and the lush green landscape of Milton has been turned into a barren wasteland. Wildlife populations have been decimated and ecosystems disrupted. Birds have lost their nesting grounds, and marine life has been devastated by oil spills and debris that now litter the shoreline. The environmental destruction will take years, if not decades, to recover from, if it ever does. 4. Humanitarian crisis. The human cost of the hurricane cannot be overstated. Hundreds of lives have been lost, and the death toll continues to rise as rescue teams uncover more bodies buried under the wreckage. Those who survived are left homeless, traumatized, and without basic necessities. Thousands of people are now living in temporary shelters, but these are overcrowded and under-resourced. Food and water are scarce, and the threat of disease looms large. Medical facilities are overwhelmed, with doctors and nurses struggling to care for the injured and sick in makeshift clinics. Supplies of medicine are running out, and there's a dire shortage of clean water and sanitation, leading to outbreaks of waterborne diseases like cholera and dysentery. Mental health is another looming crisis, as survivors deal with the trauma of losing loved ones, homes, and their entire way of life. 5. Psychological toll. The psychological scars left by the hurricane are perhaps the hardest to measure but will be felt for generations. Survivors speak of the haunting howls of the wind and the terror of watching everything they've built being destroyed in a matter of hours. Many are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Children, in particular, are deeply affected, having lost their homes, schools, and sense of security. They live in constant fear of another disaster, and many have been left orphaned or separated from their families. The community spirit of Milton has been shattered. The social fabric has frayed, as people, desperate to survive, turn inward. Crime rates have surged as looting and violence break out in the lawless aftermath. Trust in local government and emergency services has eroded, as many believe the authorities were unprepared and slow to respond. As the days turn into weeks, despair sets in. The hope that Milton will ever return to its former self is fading fast. 6. Slow and inefficient recovery efforts. The recovery process has been slow, riddled with bureaucratic inefficiencies, and marred by corruption. Aid has been slow to arrive, and when it does, it is often too little and too late. International relief organizations are stretched thin, and local authorities are overwhelmed, unable to coordinate effectively. The distribution of food, water, and medical supplies has been chaotic, with many areas of Milton still receiving no assistance weeks after the hurricane hit. Reconstruction efforts are hampered by a lack of resources and skilled labor. With roads destroyed and key infrastructure in ruins, it is nearly impossible to transport materials and equipment to where they are needed most. The federal government has promised aid, but residents of Milton are skeptical, knowing that such promises often go unfulfilled. 7. Long-term consequences. The long-term consequences of the hurricane in Milton are grim. The town's population has begun to shrink as those who can afford to leave have fled to safer, more prosperous areas. Those who remain are the poorest and most vulnerable, trapped in a cycle of poverty and despair. Property values have plummeted, and there is little incentive for outside investors to fund rebuilding efforts in a town that may never fully recover. Schools remain closed, with no clear timeline for when they will reopen, leaving an entire generation of children without access to education. The healthcare system is in shambles, and mental health services are virtually non-existent. The social and economic scars left by the hurricane will likely persist for decades, and Milton's future looks bleak. Conclusion. The hurricane in Milton has left a trail of devastation that will not be easily erased. The town's infrastructure, economy, environment, and, most tragically, its people have been forever altered. Recovery is possible, but it will be a long, arduous process, and for many, life will never return to what it once was. The tragedy of Milton serves as a stark reminder of the immense power of nature and the fragile nature of human civilization in the face of such forces.